Howdy, everybody.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Thank you for coming. And thank you for coming. I'm so glad you're here.
It's such a pleasure. I mean, TechCrunch we have such a deep history with.
Absolutely.
Mike Arrington started as a WordPress.com blog, just him, and it kind of scaled, and now y'all are, you're here with 10,000 people, and it's kind of incredible.
Absolutely. Well, we have a very big vested interest in what happens with WordPress. So anyway, it's so nice to see you. You'll never remember this, but I first met you when you were probably in your early 20s at the house of a mutual friend.
Huh.
And I've followed your career since, and I mean, I've just been sort of amazed. You've accomplished more in your 40 or so years than most people, I think, accomplish in a few lifetimes. It does feel now that that is potentially in peril, so I'm glad that you're here to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Maybe peril is maybe would disagree with that word, but it does feel really dire. And so I think we can probably surmise that a lot of people in the audience know what's happening, but there are going to be people watching this video online who may not. There's going to be people in the audience who maybe also don't know exactly what's happening. So I just want to sort of like set the scene for a second.
Sure.
So you co-created WordPress, this open source technology, in 2003. Open source meaning anybody can download it and use it. Separately, you are the the CEO of Automattic, this company that has like a dozen or more properties, really interesting things.
Yeah, we started in 2005. So we started basically trying to create a commercial side of WordPress. So we do hosting, anti-spam plugins, Jetpack, Akismet, et cetera. But really, we're an open source and open web company, part of kind of the coalition, along with, that's trying to make the web independent, open, free. And so nowadays we have Tumblr, WooCommerce, which is kind of open source Shopify, only platform growing as fast as Shopify. Podcasting apps like Pocket Cast, Day One journaling. So we have a whole portfolio of everything. Basically, but the common thread between it all is we try to be privacy-centric, user-centric, and open source.
That's great. Parsley, we love Parsley as well.
Yeah, Parsley Analytics, yeah.
Okay, but your primary business, I think, is WordPress.com, the web hosting service.
Yeah, that's about half of our revenue, which I think we publicly said is now over $500 million a year. And and it scales from, you can start with a free WordPress.com site or pay, $60 a year, all the way up to our VIP service, which is Enterprise, which hosts y'all, whitehouse.gov. We run some of the largest sites in the world. And now WordPress has grown from being, started just a blogging platform to running over 40% of all the websites on the internet, which is 10x the number 2.
Right, which is phenomenal. But in addition to WordPress.com, which you run, there are many companies that have been built off of this WordPress technology, which is amazing. Many teams, including WP Engine, another web hosting service. And 6 weeks ago, you declared war, using your own word, on them.
Yeah. Well, what had happened was, a lot of people, when they hear WP Engine, they kind of expand the WP to WordPress, and they think it's us. They think it's an official thing. And actually, we worked pretty closely with them since they're starting. We're actually a seed investor. But in 2018, we were kicked out, and they were bought by this private equity firm, Silver Lake. And since then,
can I back up there for a second?
Sure.
You were kicked out. So they bought your shares, but you sold them unwillingly?
Yeah, we would have loved to have remained involved, but Silver Lake kind of took it over. And like they've done with many open source and open companies, they've really taken it in a quite profit maximizing place. Mm-hmm. So they started to abuse the trademark a lot more. They started to really cut corners for the user experience. There's been reports around things they do with like turning off the revisions feature for WordPress, supports. And so they built quite a large business though. So private equity is usually good at operating. They're probably around 450, 500 million. We estimate they're doing 50, 60 in free cash flow. So for the past really 18 months, we've been trying to do a deal with them and worked very closely with their board member, Lee Whitlinger, Heather Bruner, the CEO of WP Engine, and really just tried to do a deal for a long time. And it was really kind of the past 4 or 5 months that we realized they were just delaying, because they had many, many opportunities. We had previous term sheets. And then we had a final one, this one that they published actually, for sort of a trademark license. So they would have access to the WooCommerce trademark, which we own fully, the WordPress trademark, which we have the exclusive commercial license to. It's owned by the foundation, but we have a commercial license. And then access to all the WordPress.org, events and everything like that. And they refused to even negotiate the term sheet. It was 8%, but we would have negotiated that. And so, we declared this scorched earth nuclear approach where we said, all right, we've tried the nice way for a long time. And if you look at my career history, I've been doing WordPress for 21 years. I've had like 2 or 3 fights in those 21 years. So like once every 7 or 8 years. And that's because when you're open, sometimes people take advantage of you. And so to stand up to it like a schoolyard bully, you really have to fight sometimes.
Well, this feels existential for a variety of reasons, but if we can back up for a second. So I'm sorry to make you repeat yourself, but again, not everybody's caught up here. So you say that you had you'd been negotiating in good faith with them and that they were sort of stringing you along. And I know people have been saying, where's the evidence of that? Because according to WP Engine, you presented them with this sort of agreement just shortly before you went public with your sort of, aggravation with them. I mean, it sounded like they had a 48-hour window to respond, and they didn't, and then you started talking about your sort of...
I mean, the things they've done which are very misleading, they've tried to weaponize their customers against us to try to rile up the WordPress community. And 2, they've tried to say hey, this was a last minute thing. They also misled where they said that, some of the text messages they released, one part of how closely we were working with them is I was under the impression that Heather was actually interviewing for a job. And so if you look at our meetings, we had lots of one-on-one meetings with none of her staff there. That's because she was actually interviewing for Josepha's position as the executive director of WordPress.org earlier in the year. So kind of from November to January, we were having those negotiations for her actually leaving WP Engine, joining Automattic, and doing this role. So again, now in hindsight, I think she was just milking me for information. But yeah, I thought that was what was happening.
I guess, do you have evidence of that? Because she says that that's not the case, and that, in fact, you were trying to poach her, and she didn't respond. And when she didn't respond, you threatened to tell her board and potentially the press.
Well, yeah.
On
Sunday afterwards. So I think this all started, September 17th? So September 20th. I did say that. Hey, we were having these negotiations. What evidence do we? It was all verbal. She didn't put anything in writing, but we have these meetings. We have selfies together. I can show you that stuff. But it was a verbal negotiation. But we got to the point where I know exactly what she was making with WP Engine. I know what her equity is. All that sort of stuff.
Do you regret putting what you said into texts? Because there is a sort of an ugly record of texts.
No, and one nice thing about this, hopefully, going to trials, there'll be a discovery process. Mm-hmm. So they've selectively released some of my text, mm-hmm. none of hers, by the way, to sort of paint this picture. But of course, in discovery, everything will be there, and I'm very happy for that transparency, because there'll be a lot more of the story that'll come out.
So again, just trying to get to the root of, I guess, what's happening and how it gets resolved. So you're frustrated by some of the things that they did, including making the revision history harder to manage. I guess the question is, was that any of your business to start with?
What was any of my business? What do you mean?
What WP Engine does, how it conducts its...
Oh, absolutely, because they were abusing the trademark and creating a lot of confusion in the market. So if you look, actually, since this started, they've had, we estimate, tens of thousands of customers leave, and including, I had a friend of mine, Bob Perkowitz, who was in the CNBC article. He's a close personal friend. I've known him for 15 years. He had 8 sites on WP Engine. He thought it was me. So it wasn't until the story came out that he was like, oh. And so that was, he was one of the customers that has left. So, I think over the next few weeks, they're actually going to lose far more than 8% of their business. And so that's part of what they've said, actually, in their filings. That I think they had cancellations up 29%, everything. So I think that shows that as their customers are learning that they're actually not officially associated with WordPress. In fact, are attacking WordPress. They're moving off.
Okay, so you wanted, so I don't think we established that you had asked them for basically 8% of either their revenue or 8% of the equivalent of revenue in like engineering hours working on the core. One of your biggest beefs with them, in addition to saying now that they were abusing your trademark, was that they weren't contributing enough to the WordPress sort of community.
Well, that's a way to put it. Yeah, I wanted to give them the option because I knew that we're going to weaponize this and publish it. So I wanted to say it's not just about the money. It's really about like, if you're going to profit off the WordPress trademark, you need to be part of, the WordPress ecosystem.
Right.
But also it was the WooCommerce trademark as well. So there's that whole other thing that they were abusing.
Just wondering how you settled on 8%.
It's based on a business analysis. So, if you estimate that would be about 32 million, they still would have been free cash flow positive. And based on our estimates and, the negotiations that we've had over the past 18 months, we felt like that was a fair amount.
Because
By the way, if you look at their R&D, part of the reason they're so profitable is they don't have any IP. They don't create WordPress. They don't spend any money on the primary thing that they're selling to their customers. So if you look at any other tech company, they're spending way more on R&D. So this is basically kind of like their outsourced R&D cost.
Well, they say that they say otherwise. They say they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars, developing their business. And they also say that they've contributed a lot to the WordPress community, plugins, sponsorship to WordCamp.
Sponsorships to WordCamps are for advertising, so they've, I think in total that they've ever sponsored since they started, I think it's around 400,000. And, there's other sponsors that would have happily had their space. So they're no longer allowed to sponsor, and already other companies have taken their spots. So it's really advertising. It's like if you had sponsors here, they're doing it not just out of altruism, they're doing it to get customers.
Okay. How dare you say that about our advertisers? I did want to say, so let's talk more about this whole trademark issue, since that's, I guess, where we're kind of heading now. So 14 years ago, you did contribute the WordPress open source software and trademarks to the WordPress Foundation, which everyone sees as a nonprofit that they didn't think that you sort of would claim, continued ownership over. You wrote at the time that Automattic had transferred the WordPress trademark to the WordPress Foundation to ensure access to WordPress and related open source projects in perpetuity. You added, Automattic might not always be under my influence, so from the beginning I envisioned a structure where for-profit, nonprofit, and not just for profit could coexist and balance each other out. It's important to me to know that WordPress will be protected and the brand will continue to be a beacon of open source freedom, regardless of whether any company is as benevolent as Automattic has been thus far. It sounds to me like you were saying, take it, go. And now it sounds very much like the extreme opposite.
It's important to remember the context. So Automattic's been around for a while. Mm-hmm. I just celebrated actually 19 years there. So in 2005, when we started, I was 21. Our first round was 1.1 on 3.3. That was our Series A, by the way.
Good old days.
And so, and as a kid, I didn't have control over the company. Mm. At the time, the investors controlled it. And we actually brought in a CEO, Tony Schneider, who actually won a Crunchy for CEO of the Year back in the day, I think 2008 or 2009.
I know, Tony.
And so, fast forward to today, I now vote 84% of the shares, so I have founder control again. But at this time, I didn't. Mm. And so that meant that Automattic could have been sold. It could have been taken over by investors. I could have been kicked out, lots of things. So, again, at the time, the trademark belonged 100% to Automattic. So it was owned by the company. So I had a multi-year negotiation to try to transfer the trademark out. So I was basically negotiating with the investors, the board, everyone like that. So we created this 501(c) nonprofit, the WordPress Foundation. There's a lot of IRS rules around nonprofit foundations. So the foundation actually has an educational remit. We run these word camps. We do, teaching people to code in other countries, teaching women to code, that sort of thing, like lots of educational remit. And then we wanted to hold the intellectual property of the WordPress trademark. So when that happens, we did a transfer of the trademark. This is all kind of complicated, but hopefully it helps people understand. And the foundation, as part of that, sort of gave a commercial. It allowed Automattic to keep the commercial license. And then I had a license to run WordPress.org. So WordPress.org, again, just started with me registering the site on GoDaddy in 2003. And it didn't officially have a trademark or anything. The trademark came a few years later. So I've always just run it personally. And so I have a license to run it for WordPress.org. Automattic has a license. If the foundation has a 3-person board, I'm one of the 3, so it's truly an independent board. And then, for example, if I were not a good steward of the WordPress.org, website and trademark, the foundation could actually take it back from me and give it to someone else.
Who are the other 2 board members?
Shel Farley and Mark Gosh.
And what do they think of all of this?
Well, we just had a board meeting, actually, a week or 2 ago. We published the minutes on the WordPress Foundation site. They're incredibly supportive.
Well, so I have to ask you, and I was asking you backstage how you're doing, because, I mean, what you've done is so immensely unpopular, obviously. I mean, I did see that you tweeted that you're just celebrating your 19th year at WordPress, and there was some support, but much of it was, hugely negative, like, we hope it's your last year, and we all hate you, dog. Sort of typical ex-fair, but how are you absorbing all of that?
Well, WP Engine's been very successful in their PR campaign, and they've drummed up a lot of the folks who are they're trying to make this like, oh, WordPress is in trouble or something. Now, it's been challenging, to be honest, and I wear a Whoop. My recovery and sleep has been kind of weak the past few weeks, but there's been an incredible showing of support. So lots of other executives. I was just with Mark Benioff in Hawaii a few days ago. So the folks who really understand business and other things have been very, very supportive, and including our investors or the Automattic board and lots of other companies. So if you look at, so also WP Engine's like, oh, well, this is going to happen to other companies. Yeah. But actually, if you look at WordPress.org, every other single major WordPress host, including SiteGround, Bluehost, DreamHost, because the WordPress ecosystem is about 10 billion per year. And there's all these other hosts that are collectively much larger than Automattic or WP Engine that host a lot of the 40%. So they've all come out in support as well, which has been really fantastic.
That's great, because my sense is that, I mean, again, just seeing what I'm seeing online, it sounds like a lot of people are threatening to leave. I did want to ask, in fact, about that. I mean, I talked to a couple of community members who were saying that the whole community might fork, and I wondered if that's something that you're worried about.
There might be a fork. I mean, we've had WordPress forks before, probably about 3 or 4 times in the history. And that's one of the beautiful things about open source is there can be a fork. So if WP Engine's kind of forked the software already. If you look at the version they run, it's very, very different from what core is. So maybe they'll do something more there. I think that'd be fantastic, actually, so people can have an alternative governance or alternative approach. But if you look at it, like every major release, we have a WordPress 6.7 coming out in a few weeks. It's got over 600 contributors. Only about 10% of those are for Automattic. There's been a handful, a couple that have said they're taking a break or something, probably about half a dozen. But there's many, many hundreds of others. If you look at the activity of WordPress, since September 17th, I think we've had 40 million downloads of the core software, more than that of plugins and themes. So the actual activity of WordPress is going quite strong.
But I guess, I mean, in the aggregate, is it worth it to even take that risk over this battle with them? And also, Matt, relatedly,
I obviously think it's worth it. Now, and again, if this were happening every year, there'd be something wrong with us. It's kind of like the old saying, like if you wake up every day and every new meet's a jerk, maybe you're the jerk. But if every 5 or 10 years, we have something like this happen, I think that's probably about normal.
I guess for the developers out there who want crystal clear clarity, and I know you've been asked this before, and I haven't heard a really crystal clear answer. What is the threshold? So at what point did they overstep? I mean, what kind of guarantee can you offer to other people that this won't happen if they also become highly successful as WP Engine has become?
Well, like I said, there's plenty of other businesses which are just as big as WP Engine. So GoDaddy's WordPress business, SiteGround's WordPress business, Bluehost, they're all similar size or larger. So, and we have great relationships with all those. If you look at the changes they've been making to their website since this all started, their lawyers are obviously telling them they're doing something wrong. So they've added a lot of registered trademarks. They've changed the names of all their plans. Like one of their plans was actually called WordPress Core, which in the WordPress community means something very specific. So they had a lot of really confusing stuff. I think the other thing that's very telling is, they're not on stage. They're not talking to press. It's all going through their lawyers, Quinn Emanuel. So when you have nothing to hide, when you know, on the right side. I'm doing press, I'm doing podcast, I'm here, etc. When you have something to hide, you have it all go through a spokesperson and your lawyers. So.
Well, people choose different strategies. I'm thankful you're here talking.
And I'll also
about
say
it.
from the legal point of view, you know, we had Neil Katal sign up to lead this case. He's one of the top lawyers in the country, Supreme Court board, worked under Obama. And he's actually faced off with Quinn Emanuel a number of times, as in won every single case. So I think from a legal point of view, we feel very, very strong as well.
I actually wanted to ask, he is still your lawyer? Because I saw that somebody withdrew their service earlier this week.
We replaced a previous lawyer with Neil's firm, which is Hogan.
Okay. I wanted to also ask you a little bit about your staff buyouts.
Oh, yeah.
So first, you had offered to give them either $30,000 or severance.
6 months of salary,
right, or
actually.
6 months of severance. Right.
Which for
Or salary.
you know, for most people, they make far. You know, we had people making high six figures that took the buyout.
So it was like, if you aren't happy with the way I'm conducting the business right now, take this. And then after that happened.
Well, it wasn't just that.
Okay.
So we had people resign for a variety of reasons. We had one guy who was like, I love you, but I really hate working with this other person at the company. So there was a variety of reasons. It was an alignment offer, so not dissimilar to what like Coinbase did, branded Coinbase, or what other companies have done.
But this was very much tied to what's been happening. It wasn't like.
Well, they say never waste a good crisis. So.
Well, I was going to ask you. So subsequently, just to let everybody know, so there was a point where you offered people 6 months' salary, and then you said, you know what, if you miss the window, I'm going to give you one more chance, and I'm going to let you take 9 months of pay.
Yeah. So that was kind of funny. So even after this 6 month buyout, we had a leaker at the company. So someone who was taking screenshots of like internal private stuff and leaking it. So I know you love leakers, but it kind of breaks the trust. We have a very high transparency environment at Automattic where basically everyone can see everything, all the revenue numbers, pretty much everything. So, someone breaking their confidentiality agreement is really, really tough. So I created this second buyout, basically just for the leaker, where I said, all right, it was a much shorter window. It was like a 4 or 5 hour window.
Or something.
And it was 9 months of payouts. And it was kind of funny. The leaker actually got in touch in the first hour.
Was that right?
And they confessed, actually. And I said, you know what? Great. I actually have incredible respect for this person. Here's the 9 months. And here you go.
So altogether, I saw a report that the 6 month buyout, around 8.3% of people.
159 people, yeah.
And how many more? Was it just the leaker who took the 9 month deal, or I'm assuming more?
So the second deal, the first deal, we cut off your access the same day. The second deal, we said, hey, when the 159 left, we've actually seen a huge boost in business, so we're hiring as fast as we can. So for the second deal, if you're the leaker, we'll cut off access immediately. But for others, we might ask them to stay on, possibly until next year, just because we're very short-staffed right now. So we kind of need to hire. So there were some other people that have taken it. Our employee count is actually totally public. So if you go to automattic.com/about, it shows our current number.
You had 1,900 at the start of this. How many do you have now?
It says on the website, I think it's probably 17 something.
Okay.
And that number has actually gone up since the second offer because we're hiring, again, as fast as we can.
Although you're also dealing with this. You can't be hiring too quickly because I think you're very distracted.
I think we've hired 26 people this month.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I did want to ask if there was anything. So great, and I was wondering if you were also using this as an opportunity to downsize.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I think like many companies that we probably were a little bit bloated. Mm-hmm. So the headcount of Automattic, or sorry, I don't like the word headcount. The total employee number actually was up to 2,100. And I think like many companies, we kind of grew a little too fast in the COVID boost. And with the efficiencies in AI, with productivity, everything, we're just seeing that we can serve our customers better, just more efficiently. So I could actually see a point where Automattic, reaches $1 billion in revenue with possibly fewer people than we have today.
I wanted to ask because Mike mentioned when he was introducing us that Automattic was valued at $7.5 billion back in 2021. I did see that BlackRock had marked down the value of its holdings to half of that amount, essentially, back in March. So there have been theories that this whole fight with WordPress was sort of driven by Automattic being in some sort of state of duress. wanting to drive down the value of WP Engine so you could acquire it. So do you want to can you tell me about your company's financial health and also if there is any truth to your potentially wanting to acquire this company?
Yeah, what can I say about that we've said publicly? $500 million in revenue. We haven't raised any primary capital and have no plans to. So, running at break even or better, and hiring aggressively and growing very fast. So.
And what about WP Engine? I mean, you have talked here today and in text and tweets about how people are leaving WP Engine and it's probably not worth what it was worth when Silver Lake invested in.
It's been widely rumored that they were shopping around and trying to sell WP Engine earlier in the year, trying to get a $2 billion valuation. They obviously weren't able to do that. And, I talked to one of the private equity that actually looked at buying them. And they said part of the reason they didn't buy it is they were like, well, they don't have any IP. And what's going on with this trademark? They don't have a trademark license. So I think that's part of what's happening. I'm actually very surprised that Silver Lake hasn't come back to the negotiating table because I do feel like if I were valuing WP Engine, it would be under their revenue right now, because they're not growing anymore. They're in this legal battle, which I think they're going to lose. And they're losing a lot of customers. So we'll see what happens. They're either going to, like I said, we're at war with them. We're either going to go brick by brick and take us and other companies, take every single one of their customers. Or, hopefully, if they could end this all tomorrow, but happily negotiate. Heather, Lee, if you're watching this, happy to talk, to reach me.
So you do have to respond to a preliminary injunction by, I think, the end of today. Is that correct?
I think we're doing a filing today, and then there's a hearing in November, in a few weeks. So, the legal process takes a while.
So right now, they're still in a state of being sort of cut off from the tools they need to cater to their customers.
Well, so there's WordPress.org, the sites. They've lost access. They were able to replicate the plugin update service and everything that they were relying on WordPress.org. It took them a few days, but they've replicated all that. So they're serving their customers, they say, just fine. And, if we lose the injunction, what happens? Well, we have to go back to the state of what they were doing beforehand, where they access WordPress.org. So that's fine.
I guess, so if you continue forward, this could take years.
Yeah, so, the estimates I've heard from Neil and others is that, worst case scenario, if we lost everything, it would be kind of happening in 2026 or 2027.
Wait, say that again? If you lost the battle, it would take until 2026 to resolve?
Yeah. If it goes to jury and everything like that, yeah. That's just how the legal system works. If you look at the legal cases, they take a very long time.
What do you do? Again, I can't sort of emphasize enough how much animus toward you I'm seeing out there.
And also lots of support, but we notice the negative a little more.
Yes, but really, I mean, it seems really, it's just so curious to me that it would be worth it to you to pursue this for 2 years. I guess in the meantime, how do you manage sort of, that community that's very frustrated with you with handling this lawsuit and pushing to Automattic forward for the next couple?
Well, we're trying to do some press, right?
Yeah.
So, which hopefully translates some of the story. There's actually going to be some cover magazine articles coming out, which is pretty exciting. Thank you so much for having me here. And we're just trying to connect with people. So I'm doing calls with the community, still running WordPress and running Automattic day to day. And it's also just kind of interesting. We could do a quick poll here in the audience. Those of you who knew WP Engine before, did anyone think it was officially associated with WordPress? Raise your hand. Yeah. So,
not that much.
And the legal threshold for a trademark is 15% confusion. So we found in polls much higher than that, and so we think there's a strong legal case here.
What do you think of WP Engine's point that they've helped grow awareness of WordPress? I mean, there are millions of people who wouldn't be using WordPress probably if not for them.
Yeah, so I mean, they host somewhere between 800,000, 900,000 sites.
Mm.
That is something. But WordPress is far larger than that. So their market share of WordPress is under 5%. So Yeah, under 3% actually. So yeah, they're there. But if they weren't around, guess what? Bluehost, SiteGround, all these other hosts would happily have those customers. We'd happily have those customers. And in fact, we're getting a lot of them.
I wish you well throughout all of this. I am wondering, do you have who's sort of mentoring you? You mentioned these, 2 board members on the WordPress Foundation. Who else sort of is advising you here? And
Yeah, so the Automattic board is pretty incredible. We have Tony Schneider, Phil Black, who have been involved since day one. Our independent board members, General Ann Dunwoody, amazing woman. Actually, the U.S. military's first ever female 4-star general. And so she's retired now, but has been on the board for a couple of years. The board member is Sue Decker, former CFO of Yahoo, also on the board of Berkshire Hathaway, Costco. So again, incredible mentor. Mark Benioff has been an incredible mentor through all this. And I also have a background network of other CEOs. We have kind of a, whether it's the Brian Armstrong, the Collison brothers, people who have kind of grown up with over the past few decades. And, so we all talk in the backgrounds.
And nobody said, Matt, stop.
Who said Matt, stop? So there's one executive of a public company who I'm very close to, and he actually was pretty concerned. So he reached out over the past few weeks, and because he was reading also kind of the haters, the bad press. And so yeah, I actually been sort of spent some time with him, and as he learned more and more details of the case, he's turned around. I won't say his name, but he's someone who's very close to the open source movement as well.
Okay. Well, again, we've loved WordPress over the years. We're very concerned about all of this, and we'll be following your next moves closely. But thank you again for joining us. I really, really appreciate you taking the time.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you all for coming out. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.